Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you a question. What does it mean to forgive someone? Is it about sitting across from them, hashing it out, hearing the words, I'm sorry, and responding with, it's okay? Sometimes yes, but other times it's not. There are moments in life, moments that define us when the most powerful act of forgiveness isn't spoken aloud. It isn't a handshake. It isn't a long message or a dramatic confrontation. It's silence. It's letting go. And it's walking away for good. You see, forgiveness isn't about them. It's not about giving someone else permission to continue being in your life. It's about you. It's about releasing yourself from the emotional prison you've been holding yourself in. Forgiveness is for you, not them. When you forgive in silence, you're saying, I refuse to let this pain live rent-free in my mind. You're not waiting for their apology, their acknowledgement, or their validation. Why? Because your peace is too expensive to be bought by someone else's remorse. Silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Sometimes words aren't going to fix what's broken. Some people aren't ready or willing to understand your pain. And that's okay. Silence doesn't mean you're weak, it means you're wise enough to know when a battle isn't worth fighting. Closure isn't always a conversation. Here's a hard truth, not every chapter in your life will have a clean ending. Some relationships, some betrayals, they're meant to end quietly. And that's where you become the author of your own peace. You don't need them to write the final page. Emotional intelligence is power. When you forgive someone silently and walk away, you're exercising one of the highest levels of emotional intelligence. You're saying, I'm in control of my response. I won't let this situation dictate my state of mind. Boundaries are healthy, not hostile. Forgiveness doesn't mean access. Read that again. Just because you've forgiven someone doesn't mean they deserve a front row seat in your life. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for them and for yourself is to close that door. Letting go is a gift to yourself. Carrying anger, resentment, or bitterness, it's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to suffer. Forgiving in silence means putting down that poison and walking away. Lighter, freer, and ready for what's next. So here's the takeaway: forgiveness isn't weakness, and silence isn't defeat. When you choose to forgive someone silently and move on, you're not avoiding conflict, you're prioritizing peace. Your life is too short and your energy is too valuable to be wasted on people who refuse to grow with you. Forgive them, release them, and move forward with the unstoppable force of someone who knows their worth. Because the best revenge isn't anger, it's peace. Thank you. When we talk about forgiveness, most people think of it as an external act, something you do for the other person. You sit them down, you look them in the eye, and you say, I forgive you. And while that can be powerful in certain situations, it's not the only path, nor is it always the healthiest one. The truth is, forgiveness isn't about them, it's about you. It's an internal process, a conscious decision to release yourself from the chains of resentment, anger, and pain. Because let's be clear, holding on to bitterness doesn't punish them, it punishes you. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack filled with stones, each stone representing an unresolved grudge, an offense, a betrayal. Day after day, you carry it, and over time, it starts to weigh you down. It affects your energy, your focus, your relationships, and your overall happiness. Now, here's the kicker: the person who hurt you, they're probably not carrying that same weight. They might not even realize how much you're suffering. So forgiveness isn't about letting them off the hook. It's about putting down that backpack and freeing yourself from the weight of carrying those stones. You see, forgiveness isn't weakness. It's one of the most courageous and empowering acts you can perform. It's a choice to say, I will no longer allow this person or this event to have power over me. And when you forgive in silence without expecting acknowledgement, validation, or an apology, you're taking back control. You're no longer waiting for someone else to give you permission to heal. A lot of people struggle with this because they've attached their healing to someone else's behavior. They think, I'll feel better when they apologize. I'll move on when they admit they were wrong, but let me tell you something: you cannot outsource your healing. You cannot place your emotional freedom in someone else's hands, because what happens if that apology never comes? What happens if they don't acknowledge their mistake? Are you going to stay stuck in anger and resentment forever? No, you must decide that your peace is too valuable to be held hostage by someone else's inability to show up the way you wish they would. Forgiving someone silently doesn't mean you're saying what they did was okay. It doesn't mean you're excusing their behavior or pretending it didn't happen. It means you've chosen to prioritize your mental and emotional health above the need for revenge, confrontation, or closure from them. You've decided that your future is more important than holding on to the pain of the past. And here's something profound: when you forgive, you're not just freeing yourself from the person who hurt you, you're also breaking a cycle. Because unhealed pain often spills over into other areas of our lives. It affects how we love, how we trust, and how we show up for the people who do deserve our energy. So forgiveness is, at its core, an act of self-love. It's a declaration to yourself that you deserve peace, clarity, and emotional freedom. It's not a performance for someone else, it's an intimate, internal transformation. And the most powerful part? You don't need anyone else's permission to do it. It's your choice, your freedom, and your gift to yourself. Silence is often misunderstood. People associate it with weakness, avoidance, or even passivity, but the reality is far more profound. Silence, when used intentionally, is one of the most powerful tools of emotional mastery. It's not just the absence of noise, it's a deliberate choice to protect your energy, your mind, and your peace. There are moments in life where words will do nothing to heal a situation, fix a broken relationship, or change someone's perspective. In those moments, silence becomes not just an option, but wisdom. When someone wrongs you, betrays you, or wounds you deeply, the instinctive reaction is often to confront them. You want them to understand your pain, to feel the weight of their actions, and to acknowledge the damage they've caused. But here's the truth: some people aren't ready to hear you. Some people aren't capable of seeing your perspective because they're too caught up in their own version of the story. And shouting louder or explaining longer won't make them understand. In fact, it often does the opposite. It fuels more misunderstanding, more resistance, and more hurt. This is where silence comes in. Silence isn't about avoiding the issue, it's about recognizing when further engagement is futile. It's about understanding that your peace is worth more than winning an argument or forcing someone to see your point of view. Silence says, I value my emotional well-being enough to walk away from this battlefield, and make no mistake, that takes incredible strength. It takes restraint. It takes self-awareness. You see, silence can be a boundary. It can be a shield. When you choose silence, you're not giving up, you're letting go. You're letting go of the need to have the last word, the need to be understood, the need to fix what someone else broke. Because sometimes the most powerful response to someone who doesn't respect you, value you, or hear you is no response at all. But silence doesn't just protect you from others, it protects you from yourself. When emotions are high, when anger is fresh, and when hurt feels raw, words spoken in the heat of the moment can become weapons. They can cut deeper, they can wound permanently, and they can create regret that lasts far beyond the initial conflict. Choosing silence in those moments isn't suppression, it's self-control. It's saying, I will not allow this temporary emotion to create permanent damage. And let's be honest, silence isn't easy. It requires discipline, it requires clarity, but it also requires faith. Faith that walking away doesn't make you weak. Faith that your worth isn't defined by someone else's failure to see it. Faith that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for them is to let the conversation end. Here's what's beautiful about silence: it creates space. Space for healing, space for reflection, space for growth. And in that space, you often find answers that words could never have given you. You realize that not every situation deserves your voice, your energy, or your fight. Silence isn't the absence of strength, it's the evidence of it. It's choosing stillness over chaos, clarity over noise, and wisdom over impulse. It's understanding that your peace is not something to be sacrificed on the altar of someone else's immaturity or inability to grow. In the end, silence isn't a retreat, it's a strategy. And sometimes it's the loudest statement you'll ever make. Closure. It's one of those words we hear all the time, isn't it? People talk about it as if it's a destination. A final chapter neatly written and signed off with both parties shaking hands and walking away with a sense of peace. But real life, rarely offers you such clean endings. The idea that every conflict, every betrayal, every broken relationship must come with a sit-down conversation, heartfelt apologies, and mutual understanding is frankly a myth. Sometimes closure isn't a dialogue. Sometimes closure isn't even an event. Sometimes closure is a decision, a private, internal moment where you say to yourself, this ends here. I'm done carrying this weight. The truth is, we often tie our healing to someone else's behavior. We convince ourselves that if we could just have one more conversation, if we could just explain ourselves better, if they could just apologize sincerely, then we'd finally be free. But that puts your emotional well-being in someone else's hands. And let me tell you something, that's a dangerous place to leave your peace. Because what happens if they refuse to listen? What happens if they deny their role in the pain they caused? What happens if they're not capable of giving you what you're asking for? Waiting for someone else to give you closure is like standing in the rain, hoping the storm will stop because you asked it nicely. It doesn't work that way. Closure isn't about them, it's about you. It's about making a choice, a conscious, intentional choice to stop revisiting a chapter that's already been written. To stop replaying scenarios in your mind, imagining better outcomes or perfect conversations. You see, we crave closure because we crave understanding. We want to know why they hurt us, why they left, why they chose to act the way they did. But here's something you need to accept: you might never get those answers. And even if you did, would they really change anything? Would their explanation make the pain disappear? Probably not. True closure doesn't come from their words, it comes from your decision to stop needing their words. It comes from you deciding to close the door, lock it, and throw away the key, not because you hate them, not because you want revenge, but because you love yourself enough to move forward. There's something incredibly powerful about finding closure within yourself. It means you're no longer tethered to someone else's action, someone else's apology, or someone else's timeline. You become free to heal on your own terms, at your own pace, without waiting for someone else to participate in your process. But make no mistake, this isn't easy. Walking away without the conversation you wanted, without the clarity you hoped for, takes incredible strength. It takes maturity to say, I might not understand why this happened, but I refuse to let it define me any longer. And here's the thing, sometimes people can't give you closure because they don't even have it for themselves. They're still running from their own guilt, their own shame, or their own denial. You cannot expect someone who is emotionally unavailable to provide you with emotional resolution. Closure then becomes an act of self-respect. It's about recognizing when enough is enough and deciding that you're no longer willing to keep reopening a wound just to see if it's still bleeding. At some point, you have to let it heal. So let go of the fantasy that every broken connection will end with perfect words and mutual respect. Real life is messy. People are messy. But your peace doesn't have to depend on their mess. You can create your own closure. You can write your own ending. And when you do, you'll realize that the most important chapter of your life isn't the one where they apologize, it's the one where you let go, moved on, and found your peace anyway. Emotional intelligence is one of the most critical skills you can develop, not just for managing relationships with others, but for mastering your relationship with yourself. When someone hurts you, betrays your trust, disrespects your boundaries, or causes you emotional harm, your first instinct is often emotional reactivity. Maybe it's anger, maybe it's frustration, or maybe it's sadness. These emotions are valid, they're real, and they deserve to be acknowledged. But here's the thing, emotions are powerful. And if you're not careful, they can hijack your response and push you into actions you'll regret later. Forgiving someone in silence and walking away without giving them the satisfaction of seeing you lose control is an extraordinary demonstration of emotional intelligence. It's not about suppressing your feelings, it's about managing them. It's about pausing long enough to ask yourself, what outcome am I really chasing here? Do I want revenge or do I want peace? Do I want to prove a point or do I want to move on? You see, emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize your emotions, understand them, and channel them in a way that serves your higher self. And sometimes the most emotionally intelligent decision you can make is to step back, breathe, and choose silence. Why? Because not every situation deserves your energy. Not every argument deserves your words. And not every person has earned the right to witness your vulnerability. Walking away doesn't mean you weren't hurt. It doesn't mean you don't care. It means you value your peace more than proving your point. It means you've risen above the situation and chosen not to let someone else's actions dictate your state of mind. That's power. That's self-control. That's wisdom in action. But let me be clear, this isn't easy. Emotional intelligence isn't a natural talent, it's a skill. And like any skill, it takes practice. It takes practice to feel anger and not let it drive your words. It takes practice to feel hurt and not let it consume your identity. And it takes practice to forgive someone silently, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. When you respond emotionally in the heat of the moment, you're handing over your power. You're allowing the person who hurt you to control you long after the damage was done. But when you pause, when you step back, when you respond intentionally instead of impulsively, that's when you reclaim your power. Think about it this way: your mind is like a stage and your emotions are the actors. When you let anger or resentment take center stage, the wiser, calmer parts of you, your clarity, your rationality, your peace, get pushed backstage. Emotional intelligence is about knowing when to let each actor step forward and when to pull them back. Forgiving someone in silence is not an act of avoidance, it's an act of maturity. It's saying, I refuse to let this situation reduce me to someone I'm not. I refuse to let my emotions write a story I'll regret reading later. But here's where it gets even deeper. Emotional intelligence isn't just about your response to others, it's about your response to yourself. Can you sit with your pain without trying to numb it with distractions or retaliation? Can you acknowledge your hurt without letting it turn into bitterness? Can you forgive yourself for not seeing the signs sooner, for trusting someone who let you down? Forgiving someone silently and moving on isn't a weakness, it's a superpower. It's a declaration that you're in control of your own emotional state. You're not waiting for an apology. You're not waiting for them to understand your pain. And you're certainly not waiting for validation. You've decided that your peace is non-negotiable. In the end, emotional intelligence isn't about being perfect or never feeling anger. It's about not letting those emotions drive your life. It's about choosing responses over reactions, peace over chaos, and growth over resentment. And when you master that, you don't just walk away from hurt, you rise above it. Boundaries are one of the most misunderstood aspects of relationships. People often confuse them with punishment, pettiness, or even hostility, but in reality, boundaries are an act of self-respect. They are the lines you draw in the sand to protect your peace, your energy, and your emotional well-being. When you forgive someone in silence and choose never to speak to them again, it's not about revenge. It's not about revenge. It's not about holding a grudge. And it's certainly not about being cold-hearted. It's about recognizing that not every person deserves continued access to you. Forgiveness and boundaries are not opposites, they go hand in hand. You can forgive someone wholeheartedly, release the resentment from your heart, and still decide that they do not belong in your life anymore. Why? Because forgiveness is about letting go of the poison, but boundaries are about preventing future wounds. Too many people believe that forgiveness means reconciliation. They think that if you've truly forgiven someone, you should let them back into your life with open arms. But that's not true. Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, but reconciliation is a two-way street. It requires effort, accountability, and genuine change from both sides. If someone has shown you through their actions that they are unwilling or incapable of respecting you, then keeping them at arm's length isn't cruel, it's necessary. You see, every relationship you allow into your life is a door to your mental and emotional space. Some people deserve a wide open door, others only deserve a small window. And then there are those who should not have access at all. This isn't about judgment, it's about discernment. It's about knowing your worth and refusing to compromise your peace for someone who repeatedly shows disregard for it. But here's the part: most people struggle with setting boundaries. Feels uncomfortable. It feels heavy. Why? Because we're wired for connection, and boundaries can feel like disconnection. We fear being seen as harsh, unkind, or unforgiving. But let me tell you this: someone else's discomfort with your boundaries is not your responsibility. If someone feels entitled to unlimited access to you, despite their inability to treat you with respect, that's not your burden to carry. When you forgive in silence and walk away, you're creating space, not just physical space, but emotional and mental space. Space for healing, space for clarity, and space for the right people to step in and occupy those areas with love, respect, and value. Every time you allow someone toxic to stay in your life without accountability, you're crowding out space meant for people who actually deserve to be there. Boundaries are not walls built out of anger, they're fences built out of love. Love for yourself, love for your future, love for your peace. And let's be clear, boundaries don't require an explanation. You don't owe anyone a 10-page essay on why you're choosing to walk away. Sometimes the most profound statement you can make is silence followed by consistent action. There's strength in recognizing when someone's presence in your life is no longer healthy. There's wisdom in understanding that walking away isn't giving up, it's letting go. And there's courage in standing by that decision, even when it feels uncomfortable. At the end of the day, your emotional well-being is your responsibility. It's not anyone else's job to protect your peace, it's yours. Forgiving someone without reopening the door doesn't make you bitter, it makes you wise. It's not about keeping score. It's not about revenge. It's about choosing to honor yourself, your worth, and your future. And if someone doesn't understand that, it's not your responsibility to convince them. Remember, this forgiveness is free, but access is earned. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for both yourself and them is to close that door and walk away with your peace intact. Healing is not linear. It's not a straight path where every step feels better than the last. It's a winding road with setbacks, moments of clarity, moments of doubt, and sometimes moments of deep emotional exhaustion. When you forgive someone in silence and choose never to speak to them again, the healing process becomes an internal journey, one where you must confront your own thoughts, emotions, and inner narratives without relying on external validation or closure from the other person. This is where the real work begins. Healing in silence means sitting with your pain, not running from it. It means resisting the urge to distract yourself with noise, whether that's through endless conversations about what happened, impulsive decisions, or even confrontations that you hope will bring relief. Silence forces you to turn inward, to listen to your own voice, and to make peace with the reality of what happened. And let me tell you, that's not easy. Facing your pain head on is one of the most challenging things you'll ever do because it requires complete honesty with yourself. In this silence, you'll start to notice patterns in your thinking, patterns in your relationships, and patterns in your emotional triggers. You'll start to see not only what the other person did, but also how you responded, what you allowed, and where you might need to grow. Healing isn't just about forgiving someone else, it's also about forgiving yourself. Forgiving yourself for not seeing the red flags sooner, for staying too long, or for giving too many second chances. And let's be clear, that kind of forgiveness doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow, deliberate process that requires patience and self-compassion. But here's the beauty of healing in silence: it creates space for transformation. When you're not pouring your energy into chasing closure, defending yourself, or trying to change someone who refuses to grow, you have energy left to pour into yourself. You can start to rebuild. You can start to reconnect with who you are outside of the pain, the conflict, or the hurt. And in that rebuilding process, you'll discover strengths you didn't know you had. Healing in silence also teaches you resilience. It teaches you to find comfort in your own presence, to rely on your own emotional resources, and to trust your own ability to recover. Because let's face it, there will be days when the silence feels heavy, days when the lack of closure feels unbearable. But those are the days when your growth happens. Those are the days when you learn to self-soothe, to remind yourself of your worth, and to lean into your healing even when it feels uncomfortable. One of the hardest parts of healing silently is letting go of the idea that the other person will ever truly understand your pain or take responsibility for their actions. But here's the truth: their understanding is not a requirement for your healing. You do not need them to validate your experience for it to be real. Your pain is real. Your growth is real. Your healing is yours. And perhaps the most powerful lesson of all is this: healing in silence teaches you that peace isn't something you find outside of yourself. It's something you create within. It's not dependent on someone else's apology, explanation, or acknowledgement. It's a state of being you cultivate through your choices, your boundaries, and your commitment to your own well-being. Eventually, you'll realize that the silence wasn't empty, it was full of answers, full of lessons, full of strength you didn't know you had. And as you heal, you'll notice something profound. The weight you were carrying will start to feel lighter. The anger will fade. The resentment will dissolve. And what will be left is peace, true, deep, unshakable peace. Healing isn't about forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It's about allowing yourself to feel, to process, and to release. It's about choosing not to let that pain define your future. And when you do the work, when you heal from within, without seeking permission or validation from anyone else, you'll realize that forgiveness, silence, and healing weren't just steps on your journey. They were the foundation for a stronger, wiser, and more resilient version of you. In the end, forgiveness, silence, and healing aren't just actions, they're profound expressions of self-respect, emotional intelligence, and inner strength. Forgiving someone in silence and choosing never to speak to them again isn't about weakness or avoidance, it's about mastery. It's about mastering your emotions, protecting your peace, and honoring your boundaries. It's about recognizing that closure isn't something someone else gives you, it's something you create for yourself. This journey is not easy. Silence can feel heavy, healing can feel endless. And walking away without the apology or explanation you deserve can feel like an open wound. But every time you choose silence over chaos, peace over conflict, and growth over resentment, you're building a life rooted in self-respect and clarity. True forgiveness doesn't always come with reconciliation, and true healing doesn't always come with answers. Sometimes the most powerful response is the one they never hear, the words you never speak, and the peace you quietly create for yourself. So here's the truth: you owe it to yourself to let go, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve freedom. You owe it to yourself to set boundaries, not to punish others, but to protect your well-being. And you owe it to yourself to heal, not for them, but for you. In the silence, you'll find wisdom. In the boundaries, you'll find strength. And in the healing, you'll find yourself. When you master these lessons, you don't just survive the hurt, you transcend it. And that, my friend, is where true power lies.